Well, a short time ago, President Trump posting on Truth Social that Iran, quote, has asked us to continue talks. We have agreed, but the U.S. has stated to them in no uncertain terms that the ceasefire is over. In an interview with the New York Post, he shot down new reporting that Israel uncovered a fresh Iranian plot to assassinate him. But he says he's, quote, left instructions if anything happens. Retired Vice Admiral Robert Harward is here. First to the senior correspondent Mike Tobin, who's live for us in Tel Aviv. Mike.
And Trace, we've got another night with no airstrikes, at least so far. And Qatari negotiators are on the ground in Iran right now. At the U.S. directive, their short-term goal is de-escalation. You mentioned the president's Truth Social post, in which he said Iran asked the U.S. for continued talks, but the president said the U.S. agreed, but it states in no uncertain terms that the ceasefire is over. This follows information relayed yesterday by our Aisha Hasni that talks were still happening behind the scenes. U.S. officials said the president considers those strikes on Tuesday on commercial vessels an act of terrorism. Iran's actions constitute failed performance at an unacceptable level, but the U.S. is committed to finding a resolution. Now, we reported that the Wall Street Journal had information that Israel relayed to the U.S. intelligence about a very specific plot to kill President Trump. There's additional reporting now in the Journal that indeed the reason the president switched planes on his way back from Turkey was because the new Air Force One lacked some of the defensive capabilities as the old plane. It also goes on to say that the information about this threat was not deemed to be entirely credible. Now, following the 3 tankers that were hit crossing the Strait of Hormuz, the threat level remains severe as designated by the United Kingdom Maritime Operation. They were hit traveling the Omani route supported by the U.S. Navy. U.S. Naval Forces Central Command says that southern route remains open and has been expanded. The other routes, according to the U.S., are not protected. Yesterday, 22 ships crossed the strait. Only one of them traveled that Omani route. Most of them are electing to travel the route designated by Iran. Trace?
Mike Tobin live for us in Tel Aviv. Mike, thank you. Let's bring in retired Vice Admiral Robert Harward, former Deputy Commander of U.S. Central Command and member of the Iran Policy Project at the Jewish Institute for National Security of America. Admiral Harward grew up in Iran and went to school in Tehran. Admiral, great to have you on the show. I want to pick up on Mike Tobin's reporting there, talking about the Wall Street Journal. So the Wall Street Journal is kind of going over saying, listen, maybe this threat from Israel was not all that credible, but it is the reasoning that the president decided to go with the old Air Force One instead of the new one. And I'm wondering, you know, the president kind of knocked down these threats, but still left instructions on what to do, sir. What do you think those instructions? What's your assessment? What would be in those instructions?
Well, first, let's assess what Iran's doing here. The same thing they've been doing for decades. They've been targeting our leadership in the U.S. for decades. We had key officials that had to have personal security. Secretary Pompeo comes to mind before and after his service, and others that needed personal security because of threats from Iran. Completely unacceptable. So you have to believe, of course, the president and others were on their list. So that's just indicative of the state of mind of the government of Iran and what they are not just doing now, but what they've been doing for decades. So I think the president made it clear, and I only have to assume what he wrote, that if anything were to happen from at the behest of the Iranians, that to continue to course, use power, political, military, and economic power to ensure that the current government in Iran changes, that you have a government in place that renounces the Islamic Revolution and ceases the policies and programs they've had for decades. And assassinations is one of those programs.
Yeah, I want to read this because this is from the Institute for the Study of War. It goes on to say, quoting here, recent U.S. strikes have had no visible effect on Iran's ability to threaten shipping, and it is unclear when these strikes would have an effect on Iran's ability or willingness to threaten shipping. Iran also likely calculates that it can use control of the strait as economic leverage to shape U.S. decision-making and deter further U.S. military action. I mean, that was kind of the goals, right? The goals seem to be that you cannot control the Strait of Hormuz, and that is a red line. Does this muddy that at all, sir?
Well, I think the president, again, has made it very clear Iran will never have the ability to control or influence the Gulf, nor have a nuclear weapon. And we'll use elements power, in this case, military power, to hit all the targets that present the threats. Now, what's surprising to me is how long this has gone on and the capacity of the Iranians to sustain this after long campaigns by us. So we've got to still be focused on that. And every opportunity we have to strike or hit any method they have to project power, and most prevalently their missiles and drones, should be taken advantage of. So anytime we can hit them and degrade and completely eradicate that threat, we need to do that.
Yeah. Meantime, the administration is kind of making it clear that negotiations have been underway behind the scenes. What's your gut tell you on this? And what are the odds of actually striking a deal that Iran will abide by?
Yeah, it's not going to happen. It hasn't happened in the whole history of the regime. All they is negotiate and give nothing, take anything they have. That's how we got to the first JICPO, and they were rewarded with billions of dollars. And the same thing under the Biden administration. I think what's so powerful here is the president went back to the blockade, shutting down all their money. They have no access, and we can do more of that. You know, shut down their air pass. No one can fly in and out. Shut down their borders. So really ramp up that financial pressure on Iran, because I think that can be just as impactful, if not more so, than military strikes. So use all the power we can. And as you saw in Turkey, he built political consensus with our allies. So all the pressure we can put on Iran, consistent and persistent, do it.
Yeah. Admiral, thank you for your time. We appreciate you coming on, sir.